Go ahead.
All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar on Rivercane. My name is Beth Buchanan. I'm the Regional Fire Ecologist for the Forest Service in the Southern region. But today I'm representing the Southern Blue Ridge Fire Learning Network. I co-lead this network with Margaret Bucher from North Carolina TNC chapter. The FLN covers the mountainous areas in North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia. And we really are really appreciative that you all have taken in 60 or 90 minutes today to learn about Rivercane and the work that's being done, particularly in Western North Carolina. We have two presenters today. Both of them are employees of North Carolina Cooperative Extension Service, and I think that's pretty neat. I didn't realize that Extension was involved in things like this until I met David Kozo 2 years ago when he came and spoke to the Fire Learning Network at our annual May workshop. If you're interested in learning more about Southern Blue Ridge FLN or other fire learning networks, you can get in touch with me or Liz Rank, and she put the email address in the chat so that you can sign up for a really awesome newsletter that focuses on all things prescribed fire across the country. But anyway, getting back to our presenters today, our first presenter is Dr. David Kozo, and he again works for Extension. He has a PhD in ethnobotany, and he's the director of the Revitalization of Traditional Cherokee Artisan Resources Program. He's been in that position for 15 years, and again, we met him 2 years ago when he came and talked to FLN. I think we're really honored because apparently this is his final presentation because he is retiring next month. So thank you, Dr. Kozo, for doing this for us. And he will be followed by, he'll be followed up by Dr. Adam Griffith. He also has a PhD, and his is in geography, and his undergrad and master's degrees are in biology. He's looking to become the director of this program soon. And with that, I will let you gentlemen get started with your presentation. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Beth. All right, well, we're going to start. This is the start of the show is Rivercane, cultural workhorse and ecological powerhouse. And by the end of this talk, you should realize why both those things are very true. Oh, we're not moving. Okay, good. The infomercial portion of this talk is a little bit about RTCAR and what we do. RTCAR is the revitalization of traditional Cherokee artisan resources. I started this program about 15 years ago, and we were set up to secure the resources for the Cherokee artists. I'm not going to say a lot about RTCAR today because we need to get this moving. But our mission statement is to preserve, protect, and teach the heritage of Cherokee traditional resources, land care, and culture. But the star of our show is Rivercane, Arundinaria gigantea. A few Rivercane facts. A Rivercane is the largest species of Arundinaria. It's our only native North American genus of bamboo, historically reaching as much as 40 feet in height. There are 3 species, but Arundinaria is our only genus in North America. Most places of the world that have a lot more bamboo will also have a lot of different genera of bamboo. Largest cane breaks will occur on alluvial floodplains where it tolerates inundation but not prolonged submergence. It doesn't like wet feet. Adam's research really showed, especially up here in the mountains, it is not a wetland species. It doesn't thrive in wetland soils. It likes the drainage. Cane breaks were often rejuvenated by burning every 7 to 10 years Now, this is an estimation. Really, the only burn we've had done so far is down at the Sumter National Forest site. And in the 15 years I've been directing this program, that is really the first burn we've had. So this has been projected that, and they say that more frequent burnings were detrimental. From our perspective, it probably needs to be a little less for artisan quality cane. We wouldn't want to see that much burning. Cane breaks once covered large areas of the southeastern United States. We'll get into that a little further when we hear some of the early description of cane breaks. But it's estimated today that less than 2% of the original cover remains. And it isn't an endangered species, but it is considered a critically endangered ecosystem. This map shows the distribution of river cane. The more northerly distribution is probably very sparse. You get into Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, it's more the southern end. Out west, it's more eastern Oklahoma, eastern Texas, and down into about central Florida. But so it is predominantly, well, it is a southeastern plant. And that's really where it comes into its own. This river cane was once an essential material in the lives of southeastern Native Americans. One of the members of my committee, Dr. Charles Hudson, who wrote the book on the southeastern Indians, called it the plastic of the southeastern Indians. I know this is a long quote, but it really brings home how important river cane was to Native American lives. And this is from John Swanton's The Indians of the Southeastern United States in 1947. He said, cane supplied one of the most important of all raw materials. Besides the use of its seeds for food, it was employed in making baskets and mats, as building materials, in making fishing creels and traps, spears and arrows, backing for wattle walls, in making beds in houses, and in the construction of corn cribs, as a substitute for the shuttle in weaving, as knives and torches, in the spiral fire at creek councils, in making boxes and cradles, sieves, fanners, hampers, blowguns, blowgun arrows, shields, stockades and fences, rafts, litters, flageolets, counters, drills, and the tubes through which to blow into the medicines, as pipes to blow the fire in the burning out of mortars and in smoking, and sometimes a section was employed to hold the braids of the hair. So as you can see, it really affected all aspects of life. Processing river cane, especially for like baskets and mats, what will happen is the basket maker will split the cane. Depending on the size of the cane, usually it's quartered. If it's a very large cane, they can get up to 8 splits to 1 comb of cane. They'll split off the outer covering of it, which has a silica coating on it. They'll scrape out the inner portion of it, very thin and razor sharp. Then they'll take that, they'll dry it. It's pretty hard to get a dye to stick to it because of that silica coating. So usually the dyes will be boiled in over a long period of time. Then they'll weave these beautiful baskets and other materials. One of the programs that we're especially proud of here is the bottom right-hand picture. That is Lucille Lossie, who was one of 2 people who could actually do the double weave basket, where you weave the inside of the basket, fold down the river cane, and weave the outside of the basket, and you have 2 finished surfaces. It's about 2006, we did a program that got the art teacher there could weave oak baskets, but she wasn't a river cane basket maker. So we got Lucille to sit in on the art classes. On the upper right, it's Hannah Youngdeer, and she finished the first Rivercane basket to come out of the high school since the 1960s. They hadn't had a teacher who could do Rivercane basketry. The young fellow below, Jory Wolf, did the first double weave basket not long after Hannah. And these baskets they do fantastic work. They've gone to art competitions around the country and placed very well with their basketry. Cane mats were an important part of life. I like to compare them to the carpets of the Middle East. I worked for a fellow who sold Persian rugs for a while, and he said back in Iran, we look at them as floor covering. They looked at them as floors, as walls, very more functional than just a piece of beautiful art. And these mats were the same thing. These are two quotes I found about the mats. The woman wove mats ordinarily 6 feet long by 4 feet broad, and they were woven in designs. Mats were used in everyday life in the home for sitting, sleeping, and flooring. Mats were woven to wrap the bodies of the deceased. Priests stood on mats while preparing medicine with herbs. In council meeting, clan members sat on mats on benches and under hanging mats woven with their clan designs. And one of the Spaniards noted, with these materials, these Indians make neat and well-woven mats, and by throwing 4, 5, or 6 of them on top of each other, they fashion a roof which is useful as well as beautiful. Neither sun nor water could penetrate these mats. So, and even some of the baskets, they said they were woven so tightly you could actually carry water in the baskets. So, quite the art. Blowguns, very important for small game. This is Davey Arch, and he's demonstrating, and it looks like he's got a heck of a lean to him. I hope he doesn't go over. The blowgun darts, the fletching on there is actually the tall thistle, and they use the thistle down to make that fletching, and it seals that up nicely, so they get all the force of the wind in the blowgun actually propels the dart, and they can go pretty high up with these. You know, they'll take small game out of trees with them. And these blowguns, there used to be one in our office. It was about 7 feet long, and I picked it up and looked down it, and it seemed to just curve, and it would have gone straight to the ground. I rotated it 180 degrees, and they had figured the actual weight of the blowgun into it, and it straightened it out, and the bore was perfect running down it. So, so these things is quite a skill to make one of these blowguns. Arrow shafts were made of cane. Fish traps. These fish weirs, you see them in the rivers up here in the mountains. Well, they'll make a large V of stacking up the rocks, and then the whole community would get in the river and walk downstream and force the fish into the point of the V, and then the fish trap they would just put them into the baskets in the fish traps. As far as warfare goes, Rivercane played a part. When the DeSoto expedition traveled down the Mississippi River, they encountered warriors carrying cane shields, and they were resistant to the Spanish crossbows. DeSoto's men also observed that these cane breaks provided cover, and the raiders would fire arrows at DeSoto's party and disappear into the cane. They couldn't be chased. One of the things that chainmail was very resistant to arrows, but they found if they just split the Rivercane arrows, instead of having a point on it, when it hit the chainmail, it would splinter. And even if it didn't do a whole lot of damage, it was very uncomfortable. Flutes were made of cane. There's just a few accounts of this. I've had contemporary Cherokees argued that Cherokees didn't make flutes, but there is evidence of that in the ethnographic record. Some of the summer houses were made of split cane. Posts would be buried in the ground. and then this cane would be split and woven between them in a basket-like fashion, and then it would cover it with mud or clay. It's called wattle and daub. And also in these summer houses, or the winter houses, excuse me, they would have Rivercane benches around the edges, and they would be used for, storytelling and sitting. And this example that's in the picture is not a traditional bench, because I stole the picture off the internet, and the water bottle and the backpack are not part of traditional Cherokee culture. As far as food source goes, you can see this very purple-looking stalk on the left is about 3 feet tall. And what had happened is sometimes Rivercane will go to seed when it's mowed. We find it on the edges of fields at times. And this is an example of that. You can see this. So this is about 3 feet tall, and there are probably 40 seed heads in this picture. And the seed heads are large. It would be probably larger than a rye head. And of course, the young shoots on the right-hand side. But here's a picture of Rivercane seed. Now, I've been doing this for 15 years, and it was probably the second year I was here, I saw a seeding event. Rivercane will flower, and when it flowers, the whole clone will die. But you need two flowering events within proximity, because it needs cross-pollination to really get a good seeding event. That year, I gathered about 2 gallons worth of seed. It was very fortunate, and most of the paleobotanists really get excited about that, because they don't run across it, and the archaeobotanists, because they rarely run across the seed, and they don't have it to use as for comparison in when they're doing their digs and they find charred grains. So, and you can see each seed is about twice the size of a rye grain. Here's Carrier's 1927, The Beginnings of Agriculture in America. He said, there is some evidence that Indians, by burning the cane brakes, were able to make them bear more regularly than they do naturally. The young shoots of the cane were used much as asparagus is now. I gathered the seeds, and I was teaching a wild foods course, so I wanted to taste it, and it's really hard to get the chaff off of it, because it's not made to lose it. So it took a lot of processing. I had to wear gloves and do it by hand, and I ground the seeds up and I got a nice flour from it, and it made I made some biscuits, and let's just say they were dense and they stuck with you for a while. But they're very tasty. It's a very, very flavorful grain. What I have been told about it, though, is it is a high oil seed, so they don't stay viable for very long. The seed will only stay viable for about 3 months. So if you're gathering seed to save it for any propagation plans, I would freeze it as soon as possible. These are some of the early observations from the first folks to come through some of these regions. John Filson in 1784 on the Kentucky canebrake said, "Many, so thick and tall, it is difficult to pass through them." William Bartram in the 1770s wrote about a canebrake in Florida that rolled out to the horizon like the ocean and was alive with cattle, deer, and turkeys. Henry Hammond in the 1860s in North Carolina later observed vast breaks of cane, often stretching in unbroken lines of evergreens for hundreds of miles. Edmund Ruffin in 1859 on the prairie lands of Alabama. When the first settlements of Alabama were begun in 1817, nearly all this broad space was covered by a thick undergrowth of cane. John Drayton in 1802 said of the upcountry of South Carolina, "At the first settlement of this state, The valleys of the middle and upper country, then in the possession of Indians, encouraged plentiful growth of cane. And Benjamin Hawkins in the late 1700s, in his evaluation of the poorer creek lands in Georgia, he was excited about cane lands, which indicated good rangeland and fertile soils. So he would have these circled on the map and highlighted as good areas. Estimates of cane growth in the early days was estimated as high as 10 million acres. Today, estimates of 2%, that 2% still exists, appears to be quite optimistic. I would say the figure is probably well below 1%. Now, when we read the early Spanish accounts of the valleys that they traveled through, it was mostly cornfields, but the introduction of disease really caused a demographic collapse, and losing 90 to 95% of the population meant a lot of those abandoned cornfields would have gone to Rivercane, and there would have been Rivercane near every village. So why did these cane breaks disappear? Cane is very sensitive to grazing, even moderate grazing, and continuous grazing will cause rapid stand decline. If the rhizomes are destroyed, that will stop regeneration of the stands. And fires that were ignited to encourage growth of new foliage, which was easier for cattle to consume, that new foliage would be rapidly consumed, and it would expedite decline. Cane was also an indicator of soil fertility, the tallest cane growing on the best soils. So while the rhizomes made it very difficult to plow, the quality of the soil beneath the cane brake made it well worth the effort. And of course, development. Cane likes those nice floodplains, and those were, and it is a disturbance maintained ecosystem. So, flood control projects, damming the valleys, wiped out a lot of the cane breaks, and especially in the mountainous south, the river bottoms are also the areas of the most development. The flattest areas seeing the earliest development. So cane does not do well under a Walmart parking lot. Why should we be concerned about Rivercane, which is why most of you are here today? It's a wonderful wildlife habitat. Dr. Gideon Lincecum, frontier naturalist, called cane the great sanctum sanctorum, the inner chamber of the great hunting ground. Some of the large animals that would thrive on cane are bison, deer, elk, and bears love especially the new growth of cane. And really some of the first research, research on cane is pretty new. It started in the late 90s, but some of the first research was actually done to test Rivercane as a food source for the pandas at the Memphis Zoo. So we knew our own bears liked it, and we knew that pandas were bamboo eaters. So they tried them on Rivercane, and it turned out to do quite well. Some of the smaller animals, turkeys, of course, we mentioned, canebrake rabbit. Some of the warblers were thought to be, Bachman's and Swainson's warbler were considered to possibly be canebrake specialists. And it was thought that the passenger pigeon actually had a relationship with Rivercane, because Rivercane is there's an inversion, temperature inversion layer in a canebrake that allows these animals to roost there, and especially on a cool weather, to actually be protected from the temperature. So, pigeons do what pigeons do, and there was a nice mutual relationship, protection for fertilizer. One thing I don't have on here is the canebrake rattlesnake. maybe not the best selling point for Rivercane, and we do try to sell it. Other canebank specialists are certain insects. There are 5 known species of skipper and 2 of pearlii. So these some of these butterfly larvae actually feed on the rivercane. Domesticated animals also do really well in cane. Goats are said to do well. The evergreen habit of rivercane provides nutritious winter forage. Protein content stays high through the winter. And goats are also susceptible to parasites and low browse, which is not a problem with cane because the leaves are usually up higher. Horses that were fed on cane were said to work as well as corn-fed horses. And hogs would avidly seek out and devour the cane rhizomes, which was good for the hogs, but not so much for the cane. Cattle also would thrive in cane, and cattle fed on cane showed significant weight gain, produced a 95% calf crop, and gave excellent quality milk and butter. But it also provided year-round cover where it was. And I haven't heard this tune yet, but you're welcome to whistle it if you can read the music. As far as stream protection goes, rivercane is one of the best. Preliminary studies have shown that a 10-meter rivercane riparian buffer can reduce dissolved nutrients and sediment from agricultural runoff more effectively than a similar 10-meter forest buffer. So up to 100% of nitrogen compounds, same with phosphate, and it'll take out most of the sediment. We find what happens is in a flooding event, cane slows the water down so much that the sediment will just drop. And we've seen the sediment build up its own levee. I've seen it up to 3 feet next to the edge of the river where there's substantial cane. Rivercane enhances stream bank stabilization, protecting riparian areas during a flood event. Sediment trapped by water, okay, I just talked about the natural levees. But as far as stream bank stabilization, the nice thing about rivercane is you'll get the rhizomes running through it, and that's like rebar at the side of the river. And being a grass, that at the nodes you'll have grass-like roots, which are very fibrous and really protect this stream bank from erosion. And we've talked to some of the older farmers up here in the mountains, and they said people always used to keep rivercane around the edges of their fields because up here the rivers leave their banks a lot, and it would prevent the fields from washing out. Now up here we have 2 types of rivercane, or 2 types of cane, rivercane and hill cane. Arundinaria gigantea is the rivercane, and Arundinaria appalachiana is hill cane, also known as arrow cane. It was first named to science in 2006, but it was named by the Cherokee long before that. There's also another type of cane, Arundinaria teca, which is known as switch cane, which is down in the lower Piedmont and coastal plain, but we don't see much of it here in the mountains. This is a cross-sectional comparison of the rivercane and the hill cane. You see the hill cane is almost solid. The chamber is very tiny. You can really tell the 2 apart. Well, one way would be just to cut into it, but hill cane is much smaller. I've never seen a culm of hill cane over 3/8 of an inch. And of course, giant cane gets up. The biggest we've seen is about 1.25 inches. This is a statement about Arundinaria appalachiana from the Payne-Butrick papers in the 1820s and 30s. There is a kind of cane growing in the mountains, heavy and hard of texture, called gunny. And as arrows were made of this, they were also called by the same name. On becoming acquainted with lead, they also gave the balls the same name, as they were heavy and used in shooting. So the name for bullets became gunny. So, you know, you see that, like, the Cherokee knew about this cane for quite a while. And here's the distribution of Appalachiana, mostly in the western North Carolina area, but a little bit North Georgia, upstate South Carolina, very little bit in Tennessee and Alabama. So this is aptly named Appalachiana. And we've seen, there's one area here, it's an old mound site, so it would have been an old Cherokee Village site. And we've seen 3 very nice breaks of this solid, nothing but river hill cane. And it's the only really places we've seen like it. I'm going to talk a little bit about the differences between cane and bamboo. We get a lot of calls here and they say, well, we've got some river cane as big as your wrist. And when we get those calls, we know they're talking about different types of bamboo. But the cane culms or stems are round. They have no sulcus or groove, and bamboo will have the sulcus. You'll be able to see it pretty clearly. Now these are general. There are some places on cane where you might see a branch coming off where you see a little bit of a groove, and different bamboos. But it's mostly the yellow bamboo that's the most common around here, and it pretty much has a groove the whole way. Cane is generally under 20 feet tall and usually around 1 inch in diameter. Bamboo can be up to 70 feet tall and up to 6 inches in diameter. So again, if it's as big as your wrist, it's bamboo, which is still called cane in the rural areas, but it's not our native river cane. Cane has a stiff, straight shape with very short branches. Bamboo has long, slender branches. I've never seen cane with a branch over maybe 8 to 10 inches. And bamboo will have up to 3 feet, these long, slender branches, very wispy, and they like to lean with prevailing winds. So cane has a persistent culm leaf sheath. At each node where a branch will come off, or where there's, where there's going to be a break in the inner chamber, there'll be like a little papery sheath on there. River cane loses it at about 3 years. Bamboo sheaths are deciduous, and they fall off on that the first year as it grows up. So if you see a big pile of sheaths laying on the ground below it, and it looks like it's pretty new growth, it'll probably be bamboo. And river cane has deep, strong roots that stabilize stream beds. Bamboo tends to be weaker and shallower by comparison, with taller above ground portions, so it doesn't have the anti-erosion effects that river cane has. For additional information about cane, the USDA Giant Cane Plant Guide is excellent. You can get a free copy. It's, if you just Google that, you can go online and get a copy. It's put together by Kat Anderson. She's got a good ethnobotanical background. She did a fantastic job on this. She actually sent me a copy of it to edit, and I had nothing to add. She did. We gave her a few pictures of some of the Cherokee that were using it, but she did a fantastic job on this. So it'll give you a lot of information on river cane. Okay, that's it for part 1.
Did you want to do quick questions? Or should we just transition right to?
I didn't see any coming in the chat. If anybody has a quick question, pop it in the chat now. Otherwise, we will go on to part 2.
Let's see here.
Adam, while people are typing, do you think you could tell us what your program exists for?
Yeah, we are primarily a grant giving entity of the Cherokee Preservation Foundation. And so RTCAR was founded specifically to protect artisan resources, and was founded about 2004, 2005, 2004. I'm getting the 4 fingers from David. And so, yeah, that's what we do. We have grant cycles. One is always the first Monday in December, and the other one the first Monday in June.
Great,
Great.
thanks.
Liz,
looks like there is a couple questions for Liz.
Yeah, so it says, 2 questions. Mentions fire being both beneficial and also harmful new growth. Any advice in managing small cane breaks with new and old growth in managed areas, in areas managed with fire?
Yeah, we think the rejuvenation is better for, of course, for the old stuff. And we've seen, it looks like older breaks get tired, and I haven't, like I said, we haven't had many opportunities. I have seen younger fields burn that seem to do all right. But if you're trying to establish a really good, strong cane break, it needs to get to a point where it's actually where the cane is competing with itself. It'll form a low canopy, and then eventually, the taller cane will go above the, if you start with a 6-foot canopy, you won't start branching till you're above that, and it'll get taller and taller and taller every year. So
be a good grant opportunity.
Yeah. But
there's 2 more questions there.
Yeah, sorry if I missed this. Are the holotubes cane used by solitary bees for nesting?
I've never encountered one.
Yeah, it's I'm not sure if cane may be a little dense for if for the bees to get into it. We haven't seen it yet. I've seen it used to make bee nests, but I've heard there's controversies on those too. I mentioned this number of birds I've seen at Carolina Prairie. Just that it was mentioned that the Carolina parakeets were also, we've had so few fruiting events for the Carolina, to know about the parakeets and the passenger pigeons and all those. But the amount of seed that comes out of one of these events is amazing. I mean, a 12-foot culm will have hundreds of seed heads on it, and the ground will be just covered with seeds. So in an area where there would have been a lot of cane breaks, there probably would have been a seeding event around it some time, and the birds would have just been thriving on that. As far as seeding events, we really don't know. They say 25 to 30 years that the cane will flower. But we've only been in existence for 15 years. We haven't been able to watch it as long as we'd like. I've seen flowering events. We don't know what triggers a flowering event. We don't know if it's a shock if it's a maturity thing, if it's a shock. The first ones when I was here, there had been a couple of drought years. So it's really hard. I'll go back to what one fellow said, research from Mississippi State. He said, when it comes to Rivercane, we're still doing search. We haven't gotten to research yet.
Yeah, this is Adam chiming in, and we when I was doing field work every week in the spring, summer, and fall in 2005, 6, and 7, I saw cane flowering every year. I saw 3 or 4 flowering events. Just, oh wow, nice, well done, Nell. I can't multitask that well. Yeah, I've seen it flower every year. Some of the bamboo species, the Asian bamboos, are on a genetic clock, and the research on those is, the research pile on that is quite a bit thicker. I know one species flowered once every 76 years on a genetic clock. I will talk about transplanting for riverbank restoration. That's the next part of the talk, so I'm about to kick that off. Yeah, so unless there are any other questions for Dr. David, I will go ahead and get started. So my name's Adam Griffith, and I've been working with David for a little less than a year and hope to be here for a while longer. The first question that I think needs to be asked when discussing restoration is from what and to what? From, are we restoring these landscapes to before European contact, after the removal? David talked a lot about diseases, European diseases wiping out populations, farm fields going fallow. And so, you know, when the explorers came and saw the vast fields of cane, is that what we're after? Because that's not, you know, that's not necessarily natural by some stretches of the imagination. So from what and to what? Are we after a monoculture, as is in the picture? Or are we after a multi-species riparian buffer, which stream bank restoration ecologists give credit for? And that's a situation that we're dealing with right now, and that's why this sort of came to be, the second half of this talk. So the perspective that I'm taking is yes, if we can get rivercane somewhere on the landscape, I'll take it. I'm not going to discriminate against one type of restoration versus another. If people are interested in the plant, I am all about expanding the plant's range, provided it's in the historical, it's in its current range. I don't want to take this to other places. Even though people have been taking bamboos to other places for hundreds of years. I'm not a huge fan of that as a biologist. The plant is ubiquitous in the Southeast, right? David showed this at the state level. This is it at the county level. It's from the same source, the USDA plants database. And there are some mistakes in here, obviously. For example, Jackson County, North Carolina, where my cursor is right now, just west of Asheville, I know has multiple breaks of cane. And someone got a nice publication in Rodora. I think somebody transplanted a little patch of rivercane just over the state line in Pennsylvania in one of these counties there in the middle near where I grew up. So why is restoration necessary? Obviously, David mentioned the cultural significance. 2% of the original habitat remains is a widely cited figure within the rivercane literature, and it's probably much lower than that. Population growth, it's not going to go down. The development pressure will not go down. Here in the mountains, we just don't have much flat land. This is one of my master's research sites that was bulldozed for development, and the land was for sale, and the price seemed fairly reasonable to me. And so well, fairly reasonable is, I guess it's all perspective, but when taking a long-term approach, you know, maybe a low ball them with an offer of $300,000 for both of these tracts, but then you have a nursery site of artisan quality rivercane for the foreseeable future, operating under the assumption that you have genetic diversity and the entire thing is not one clone and doesn't flower all at once. And there's high demand for the plant. This to me is one of the most compelling reasons that restoration is necessary. Departments of Transportation would use this along highways, I'm convinced, if there were sufficient plant resources available. Nonprofits, because it does such a great job of filtering agricultural runoff. Here, Native American tribes, I'm happy to see folks from the Choctaw Nation on here, and private landowners ask about it as well. So there's definitely a lot of interest for rivercane regionally and locally here. Variety of restoration methods are possible for any plant, right? We could plant it from seed, we could get nursery material, or we could transplant. David covered the complexities of planting from seed, gathering seed, and collecting it. You need to be in the right place at the right time, and then you need to have available greenhouse resources to plant and transplant and repot and move those plants before they get really big. Nursery material generally is not widely available. There are some nurseries that carry it. I don't know how many. I used to search for it all the time, but there are a handful of them, and the prices are quite high. So when we talk about a large-scale restoration, it makes it economically unfeasible to do. Which leaves us with the third option, transplanting, which to me is the most practical and makes the most sense. It's available to just about everyone, but you need a strong back. So the first restoration effort here in Cherokee was at the campus of Cherokee Central Schools, which was constructed somewhere in the early 2000s. I was on the landscape planning committee, and they wanted to incorporate native plants and culturally important plants into the landscape. However, there was no budget for this. So we operated using volunteers and actually wrote a small grant to RT Carr when I was not involved with it. The photo in the bottom left is the site underneath a Duke Power right-of-way. And we assured them that the plant would not get over 20, 25 feet tall. If it did, I would be ecstatic, but don't tell Duke Power that. So this photo was taken in 2007. In the red circle, you can see the site of the Rivercane patch. They brought in, I believe, about 20 dump truck loads of material to raise the elevation on the floodplain of the Ecologically River. The Ecologically River is I would call it a higher energy river. We're higher up in the watershed than where Rivercane is typically found. The upper elevation of Rivercane, the range in our area locally is somewhere around 2,100 feet, and we're just a little bit above that. And if Cherokee is not above 2,100 feet, I've got the elevation range slightly wrong, but we're just north of, we're just higher than the typical elevation range for Rivercane. Just to the left of this red circle is a large pile of mulch. And so we mixed in some of the mulch, and we mixed in some crushed rock, mixed in some soil, and that was done using heavy machinery to raise the site elevation. If you're wondering how this photograph was taken, I'm slightly proud of the fact that I have been taking aerial images using balloon aerial photography, BAP method. So you just fill up a 5-foot helium balloon, put it on a 1,000-foot string, and tie a camera to it with the shutter mashed down with the rubber band. And it's a great low-cost solution that is not subject to any of the drone regulations. So I can go higher than 400 feet with the camera on the balloon. This is what the site looks like when you zoom in a little bit, the aerial view. And this was the landscape architect's rendition of it, and they did a pretty good job. This is a cross-country trail running through the middle there, and the idea was to plant 4 quadrants. So we used multiple donor sites to promote genetic diversity. We got a lot of volunteers, and we used 2 techniques. We hand dug clumps, trying to get as large a root ball with 2 to 5 culms above ground, and at least ideally you'd have more than 2 feet of rhizome, but because we were using volunteers, sometimes we would only get 12 inches of rhizome. And we also did bare root planting as well. That's when the culm is removed with the rhizome and there's very little dirt surrounding it. The survival rate for those was much lower, as you'll see. We did not trim the tops off of the plants. Our travel distance was relatively short, but I think it is preferable to trim the tops off to maintain a nice root to shoot ratio, because we're dramatically reducing the root volume, the root mass. If you're traveling a longer distance, it'd be important to cover the plants during hauling, especially if the air temperature was lower or extremely high. So here we have some happy volunteers standing in the holes that they've dug. And here we have Dr. Kozo standing in front of the Rivercane patch in March of this year. So after 10 years, the Rivercane patch has grown up quite a bit. One of the handiest things about Dr. Kozo is that he is exactly 6 feet tall. And so if you can see that there are some stems there that are about 12 feet tall. This is approaching, in a few cases, we've got some artisan quality cane over there with the culm diameters. The clump transplant survival rate was close to 100%, but the bare root survival rate was fairly low, particularly in the spring. The fall transplants did a little bit better than the spring transplants. I believe it was September, October, and then April and May of 2009. But we have greater things in store. So Warren Wilson College, located just east of Asheville, is removing 1/2 acre of rivercane for restoration. The conscientious project manager emailed us and said, we have a lot of rivercane that we're taking out, and he recognized the value of it despite the lack of rivercane in criteria for evaluation for stream restorations, for riverbank restorations. And so he really wanted to find a home for this, as well as integrating a lot of the rivercane that was on site into the existing plans. So through, I don't know, I guess I volunteered myself to facilitate the move of this plant material to different nonprofit partners. And so I've sort of fashioned myself as some sort of rivercane broker, with the city of Asheville receiving some, the city of Hendersonville, and the Nature Conservancy, Conserving Carolina, Veteran Healing Farms, and the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indian Schools will transplant some. Might not be the school site. We might put some at the greenhouse, though, definitely. The director of the greenhouse here wants some to serve as a nursery site. So we're excited about that. It's a remnant patch of rivercane. So the red polygons show the current extent of the rivercane, and you can see this is a highly influenced area by man, confined for decades by mowing and agriculture. And the culm diameters are under 1/2 inch, which means there is some interest for demonstrations, but this isn't by artisans, but this isn't you know, USDA prime #1 rivercane for some of those artists. They want culm diameters, you know, the size of an average person's thumb, say. Diameter of 1/4 is nice. A 50-cent piece is incredible. That's about 1.25 inches. So one concern is over the genetics of moving rivercane the way that we're going to do it, right? The transportation is artificial. You're fracturing the population. And I understand those concerns, and I recognize them, and I think they're very valid for, say, species of concern, threatened species, or species of interest. The geographic range of rivercane is quite large, and in geography, so much comes down to perspectives and opinions on scale, right? So when you look at the scale of the transplanting, we're really talking about moving rivercane. I couldn't even draw the red rectangle small enough for you guys to see, but it's even smaller than this. I mean, we're really moving it just from Buncombe County south to Henderson County, and then a little bit over here in our greenhouse. So the timing of this, I thought I would have a little bit more to talk about, because the transplanting was originally planned for September, and then October, and then this month, and now it's planned for January of 2020. So I really thought I'd have some wonderful pictures to show you guys. But our plan is to trim the tops of the plants to 4 feet. That'll prevent drying out. We'll remove about 12 inches of soil using a 3-foot bucket on a track hoe, which may or may not look like the one on the right. And then we'll cover them with tarps for transport on flatbed trailers, and ideally unload them the same day. I think that if their basic needs for water are met, this is a very resilient plant. So just because this is a question that someone has just typed that's relevant to the slide I'm on. I'm going to go ahead and take it now. But the question is, how much genetic work has been done on cane? Are the multiple subspecies real, or are the differences environmental? This is a fantastic question. There hasn't been a ton of genetic work done on Rivercane. There was some AFLP fingerprinting by Kathy Matthews at Western, my former advisor, while I was there in 2008. And there's a Castania publication that I'm happy to share with you. But essentially, Triplett and Clark, in their 2006 paper that described Arundinaria appalachiana, demonstrate that the differences between hill cane, river cane, and switch cane or swamp cane are real. That's Arundinaria, tecta, gigantea, and appalachiana. Right? You got the lumpers and the splitters, and the splitters love the genetic. Now, as far as the differences in subspecies, there hasn't been any research that I'm aware of done on that. And so in the field, you can come upon some river cane that looks just like Arundinaria gigantea and river cane, and you can pull up a rhizome and follow it to some that might key to hill cane, Arundinaria appalachiana. I am not, you know, I've taken botany. I'm okay. I'm not phenomenal, but it's a really difficult thing to differentiate them. If someone just brought you just a little bit of it, you'd really have to get into some of the small structures. So as far as the subspecies being real versus the environmental differences, I think that's the question, and has to do perfectly with my next slide. So there are a lot of opportunities for us to learn things about here. We'll learn about the nurture versus the nature regarding culm diameters. The culm diameters pictured here are all less than ½ an inch in the center photo. On the right is one of the largest culms I've ever found. A landowner in Tennessee called us and said, hey, I've got some rivercane on my property and you guys can come harvest it. And that's also a large part of what we do here at RT-CAR is connect the artists with the resources directly. And so this culm diameter is about 1.25 inches. It's about the size of a 50-cent piece, and it's the largest one I've ever found. The question I have is, if we move this, when we move this rivercane from Warren Wilson College to multiple other locations, how will the plant characteristics change after, say, 5 years or 10 years? Will this rivercane be able to produce larger culm diameters? Now, this would be anecdotal because this rivercane is highly marginalized. It's been pushed to the edge of a field. It's got compacted soils on the edge. So I don't think this would be conclusive. However, to me, it would indicate that the environment has stronger control than the genetics in this particular case.
And there is, right across the Swananoa River, there is artisan quality cane on Warren Wilson campus. So
right, it's
there.
Right, right. We'll learn about the transplanting methods, whether a 3-foot, you know, front end loader with flatbed trucks is a good approach, and I'm learning about logistics because I'm going to have to herd all of these nonprofits and go out there and kind of flag off the cane and allocate it for the different groups. So that's the opportunity that we have coming up. I'm extremely excited about it and a little nervous. But the question is rivercane a perfect riparian buffer species? We think so. And I think in this area, the answer is yes. And so there on the bottom right, I have my email address and David's email address. And so we're happy to entertain additional questions via the chat window or in audio if Liz and Beth want to try to facilitate that. But thank you all for your attention. And it's really nice to see a lot of familiar names on here and familiar organizations. So thanks. Are there timber harvesting techniques recommended to enhance existing low density cane patches?
We don't know a lot about how the ideal canopy. We have found the largest cane that we come across is in a partial canopy. We don't know where the line is, you know, how much. We've actually talked about projects taking light meters into cane to see.
Yeah, yeah.
We think that some of the, down in Sumter, they've actually thinned out some areas to see if the cane will do better. We don't know actually how much the burning down there affected the canopy yet.
Right. Yeah, I think it's an ideal opportunity for what do you call it? The plot, you know, split plot design with selective, you know, low, medium, and density cane, and you know, 5 culms per square meter, 10 culms per square meter, and that kind of thing. The variation in cane density naturally occurring is really amazing. Some of the literature cites values as high as, I believe it's 218,000 culms per hectare. And I transferred and changed it all to per square meter. But what you're looking at in this photograph right here is some of the highest density stuff we've seen. And this has a nice mix of density with culm diameters. This is actually taken at the site that is the closest to Cherokee. And there are other sites, however, that, like David said, the lowest, lower light levels and lower density cane is really the conditions that we're finding for the largest culm diameters. So the next question is, for riverbank restoration, would you also recommend to mix it with shrubs and hardwoods? It will grow with just about any species that's native. We've seen it right up against black walnut. It isn't affected at all by walnut or rhododendron, anything in the heath families. I think something that's really important is the shape of the stream bank. And so, you know, species composition is important, but I think getting a bank edge that isn't at a 90-degree angle, that is stepped at a 45-degree angle, is really nice. That way, the rivercane can migrate down slope to the hydric soils barrier, where I think it will be contained.
The other part of that is, at least in the few instances we've transplanted cane, it doesn't really start sending out its rhizomes till it takes at least 5 years. And so if you're doing a stream restoration with rivercane, you're going to have to wait. So you may want to put some other shrubs in. Even if the cane will outcompete it eventually, you'll have something in the process, you know, during that 5-year process. And even then, you know, once it takes off, it's great, but it's getting to that point.
The next question is, let's see. You mentioned that Francis Marion Sumter National Forest is doing restoration of cane using fire. Can you tell us about that?
We definitely had a burn down there. It's a 29-acre rivercane management area. There were a few areas. One was a transplant area. We've had pretty good success in the transplanting there, about I think at last count, an 85% survival rate. That area wasn't burned. And there was an area of some older cane that we had taken out of the burn range, which now is looking like it's aging out, and it maybe should have been burned. One problem that we saw with that is we didn't have areas of control. So all that we know that all the areas that were going to be in the burn management area, all of them were burned. We're working with the Chattooga Conservancy down there, and they're actually doing some follow-up to look at comb height and diameter from the burnt combs that were left after the burn to see what's coming back. So we don't know how much of it is, you know, some of it will be rejuvenated. We don't know. It's going to take a few years to really get a good look at that place and see what we're going to get from the Sumter site. But we're excited about it. It's the largest rivercane management area we know of right now. And, you know, if I can be proven wrong, I'd sure love to be. I'd like to see that in a lot of other places.
If anyone is specifically interested in that site, I guess, yeah, Beth, if you're curious, I think we can check with the Chattooga Conservancy regarding those monitoring reports that they've been sending us. But if you have a specific interest in that, send us an email, and we might be able to get you to those. Let's see. Next question is: have you ever seen Rivercane outcompete invasives such as Japanese knotweed or multiflora rose?
In the literature, it's generally really good at competing. We haven't tried it against knotweed. I've talked to a fellow up here. He's been wanting to do that for years to try it. Multiflora rose, I've seen some multiflora rose in cane. I think it can be outcompeted. Privet's about the only thing it will not outcompete. Privet is known to win in that battle. I have seen cane come out into a field, and even before it had much of a canopy, the fescue was dying out under it. Now we don't know if there's allelopathy. We don't know much about it, but it didn't take much cane in that field for a lot of the grass species to die out. So there's a lot to learn. There's a whole lot to learn from that, and we would love to see it go head to head with knotweed.
It's a disturbance plant. So if that disturbance is fire, if that disturbance is flood, if that disturbance is a canopy gap, there's a nice article by Paul Gagnon about, he was at LSU, and a hurricane came and he took advantage and noticed new culms shooting upward in canopy gaps. And so it has the rhizomes underneath. It's just waiting for the conditions to be right. And so that also, there's some interplay there with those competition with the non-natives. Best time of year to transplant?
Around here, we usually say February and March. It's cool and it's damp. Yeah, you especially don't want it to dry out then. But it's
pretty resilient.
Yeah, and the climate's changing. We never know if we're going to have a super wet year, super dry year, super warm winter.
Right.
A winter.
Right.
We don't know.
Right.
But that's been the general rule of thumb since I got here was we would suggest February and March, mostly for the shock of the transplant.
Right. Right. And obviously avoid the summer for both your comfort and the plant.
Yeah.
I think if you had an opportunity to do it and summer was the only option, I think you would still have reasonably high survivorship rates if your clumps were of pretty good size and you protected the cane during transport. Obviously a box trailer would be ideal, or a covered cap situation on a truck. And the related next question is: were any measures taken to protect your bare root canes, fine roots during transport and planting from drying? And the answer was basically we wrapped them in tarp, and I think that was part of the problem. That was part of the higher mortality rate of the bare rhizome and bare root transplanting in 2008 and 2009. This was a volunteer effort. We put ads in. I put ads in the local paper, and I had over 100 volunteers. Some days, big, strong people would volunteer, and some days I had families with kids, and so they were busy digging out individual culms with rhizomes, and that's what we got. Sometimes someone would be really, really engaged in the transplanting activity, and then at the end of the day, they'd come up and ask me if I could sign their paper for community service because they'd been caught drinking alcohol on campus. So you never know what you're going to get. But yeah, we'll be sure to bundle those up tightly with the tarps when we do all of these. And it's also going to depend somewhat on the nonprofits and their ability, because I'm not going to be able to be on site for all of the pickup and all the transfer. So I've got some general guidelines and some other documents. Again, folks can email us at the email addresses on your screen there if you want to see any of the guides. I think the transplanting guide is probably something that I'm going to put on my short to-do list here in the new year.
I think also with bare rhizomes, some people have tried gel.
Yeah.
Horticultural gel, and it helps, you know, but we don't have the research to back that up. So a lot of things we don't know.
Yeah, the next question is Rivercane dependent on mycorrhizae? Would you need to harvest the soil with the rhizomes? The answer is, if the mycorrhizae associations are present, you would want some soil to go with it. But the answer is we don't know if those mycorrhizae, if that relationship exists with the fungi. So we're just playing it safe. We're going to grab some soil, just in case. These are great questions. Thanks. We're trying not. I'm just trying not to make a grass out of myself. Oh yeah, that'll drive the participant numbers way down. All right, Liz.
That sounds like a wrap here. Oops.
Oh, are there any
One
negative
more.
impacts of harvesting? Any advice?
You know, in the Cherokee harvest, they're very selective because they need 4-year-old combs. So they, you know, all the new stuff. But we've seen clear cuts come back strong. You know, a lot of times with some of the farms, they'll send out their farm hands to give bean steaks, and they'll just wipe out an area. And we thought it was terrible, and you know, they came back all right. Yeah, so it's hard to say.
Yeah, we're not sure. I think the cane brake in the picture has been harvested for probably hundreds of years, and it persists. This is the best site closest to Cherokee. It's between Highway 74 and the Tuckasegee River. You know, and it's just chugging along. I think, like I was saying about it being a disturbance-based plant, you know, clear cutting would be a disturbance, and in many cases it comes back just fine. So if a burn unit has cane in it, should the ignition proceed a different way than if there was no cane? I don't think so.
Well, you know, we always
And look at it and make sure it's not, you know, tinder and it's bone dry and it's all brown. If you've got bone dry brown Rivercane, that's something to consider. But
yeah, most native fires were pretty low temperature, but you know, there have been a few ethnographic accounts of the Indians burning the cane, and it sounded like a war. So
yeah, the snap, crackle, and pop is pretty distinctive. If you have not heard it, it is very cool.
So you know, we've tried to keep like, you know, moderately low fire. But again, we don't know a whole lot. We've only had one.
Hey, Chandler asking, is there a grant associated with Rivercane restoration? I'm not quite sure what you're asking there. Maybe you can be a little more specific in the chat. Our organization gives grants, and you know, our organization did fund the one here to Cherokee Central Schools, which was great because the high school students can walk across the street in the art classes and see what the Rivercane looks like in its native environment.
But you did also say associated with the Eastern Band of the Cherokee, and that association has to be very clear. You know, it's you know, if you're working with the Eastern Band, if you're trying to provide a product that can be used by the Cherokee artisans, you know, we have limitations in our range, but our range is actually a little bit larger than the Cherokee Preservation Foundation. So it takes us out. It takes us out to within an area that somebody could drive to, because we have to have our harvesters be able to have it. But we're always looking for good cane.
Yeah.
Well, if there are no more questions, and I'll talk slowly in case anybody wants to type that last question in the box. If there are no more questions, I would really like to thank David and Adam for participating in this Fire Learning Network workshop today. One of the things that FLN tries to do is break down the barriers to getting more good fire on the landscape, and lack of knowledge is one of those barriers. So I've been looking at the variety of names and agencies represented in the participant list today, and I think we've got just a ton of different people focused on different parts of natural resources involved today, and so that tells me that this topic is really interesting to the soils people, to the fire people, to the botanists, and a lot of other people whose titles aren't listed in here. So really, thank you so much. As Adam mentioned, the email addresses are listed right there on that last slide. This webinar was recorded, and it will come up on conservationgateway.org soon. You can just search FLN webinars to find that information. That website also has a ton of information about the Nature Conservancy and fire, and the fire learning networks in general. Please, if you're interested, check out that website, learn more about FLNs and what they can do for you and your agency. And again, thank you so much, David and Adam, and thank you to the audience of 50+ people who sat in and listened to this.
Yeah, that was awesome.
I think with that, we'll wrap up. Yeah.